Hi guys, I'm back again. How are you all, you fans of Japanese horror movies? This Japanese film reportedly once held the title of the scariest Japanese horror movie this year. Alright, rather than taking too long, let's just get straight into the discussion. The film opens by showing the atmosphere of the Konoha-Inda complex, located east of Tokyo City. At that time, a young mother named Yoshi was on duty to watch over the neighborhood kids who were playing at her house. In the middle of her busyness, the kids ran out of snacks, and she told her daughter, named May, to play safely while she stepped out for a bit. Before leaving, Yoshi, who is very meticulous about safety, is seen first securing her house so as not to endanger the kids who were playing. After Yoshi left, the kids, who were starting to get bored, are seen playing a game of hide and seek. However, due to a lack of agility, one of them ran out of hiding spots because all the locations had already been taken by their friends. An hour later, Yoshi, who had just returned, was puzzled when she saw the condition of her house, which had suddenly gone quiet. Assuming all the kids had gone home, Yoshi immediately called the neighbors to ask about her daughter's whereabouts. But when she found out that her daughter was missing, one of the children said that while they were playing hide and seek, May suddenly vanished to who knows where. Even after they all went home, May was still nowhere to be seen. Realizing this, the neighbors immediately scattered to help with the search for May. After coming home from work, Yoshi's husband, named Hiko's, immediately panicked when he saw his wife filing a missing person report. After the report was processed, an exemplary police officer said that they would give word as soon as possible, and of course without asking for a single penny in payment. A moment later, Yoshi, who was still in shock, accidentally spilled a glass of tea. In her weakened state, she hurried to wash her tablecloth. But the atmosphere suddenly felt very eerie when something horrifying was found inside the washing machine. It turned out that May, who was panicking while looking for a hiding spot, had gotten locked inside the washing machine and eventually ran out of air. The story then continues 1 year after that incident. Yoshi, who was suffering from severe trauma, is seen trying to undergo therapy by participating in a method of sharing experiences. When it was her turn to tell her story, Yoshi revealed that due to her negligence, her only daughter had to die from suffocation inside the washing machine. Although she still cannot fully comprehend the tragic event to this day, Yoshi cannot stop blaming herself.
旅行なんかもしてないんでしょ?
That is why, when her mother-in-law named Esim came to visit, Yoshi listened attentively as her mother-in-law told her that near their complex there was a temple that offered services for burning belongings of the deceased. Who knows, maybe that method could help alleviate the trauma that had been haunting her. The next day, Yoshi, who did not want to continue drowning in sorrow, decided to follow her mother-in-law's advice and went to the temple. However, it was as if something was drawing her in. She felt puzzled when the brochure her mother-in-law had given her suddenly flew away in an unnatural manner, as if it were guiding her toward a certain place. Not long after, Yoshi's attention was immediately drawn to a female doll that was inside a glass case and adorned with various strange incantations. For some reason, she felt very drawn to that doll. That night, Hiko felt happy when he saw his wife looking cheerful again after more than a year of living in despair. However, that happiness turned into shock when he saw a shabby doll sitting at the dining table. Yoshi then explained that she had just bought the doll at a flea market. Even though it was quite expensive, Yoshi felt that the doll could somewhat soothe her longing for her late daughter. The The next day, Yosi went through her daughter's belongings again to dress up that strange doll. She was seen caring for and treating it very seriously, as if the doll held such great meaning for her. Until that night, Hiko, who had just come home, was puzzled when he heard Yosi humming in Mei's room. How shocked Hiko was when he saw that the doll had been dressed up exactly like his late daughter.
そうですね。目覚めはどうですか？はい、あります。
Seeing his wife, who now seemed very obsessed with the doll, Hiko began to feel worried. Therefore, he consulted a doctor named Nori. After hearing his explanation, Dr. Nori said that what Yosi was experiencing was a form of doll therapy that was quite effective in helping to restore the mental condition of someone undergoing severe trauma. Hiko was asked to remain calm because gradually Yosi was believed to return to her old self. For now, the most important thing was to provide support and let the recovery process take its course.
5歳です。
And as we can see, Hiko, as a loving husband, always continues to support his wife, even though Yosi's behavior sometimes looks like someone who has lost their sanity due to trauma that hasn't fully healed. A few months later, Hiko, who was at work, was suddenly surprised when Yosi unexpectedly came to his workplace to see him. Yosi then told him that she had just been to an obstetrician to check on her pregnancy. Hearing this news, Hiko was of course overjoyed because soon they would have another child. Long story short, 10 months later they were seen busy preparing a crib for their second daughter, whom they named Mai. And as we can see, after the arrival of their second daughter, Yosi was now much more focused on taking care of a real baby rather than the strange doll she had once cherished so much. Now that doll was only regarded as an ordinary doll, lying among a pile of other cheap dolls. 3 months later, Yosi, who had just finished taking care of her baby, intended to put her to sleep using a doll. But for some reason, as if influenced by something, Yosi instead picked up that strange doll. At the same time, Hiko felt happy seeing his wife's condition slowly returning to her normal self like before. But in the middle of their conversation, they both suddenly panicked when they saw the baby holding that doll suddenly get tangled in hair, which terrified them. After that incident, Yosi decided to put the doll back into its carrying box. Without a second thought, they immediately stored it in the warehouse to be safe so that a similar incident would not happen again. The story then continues 5 years later. The baby, who was now the same age as her older sister, was seen thanking her mother for buying her marbles. But upon arriving home, Mai accidentally dropped all of her marbles onto the floor. Yosi was immediately startled when she saw Mai suddenly ask for permission to play with that doll. Whether due to carelessness or simply not thinking much about it, Yosi actually allowed her daughter's request. That night, Yosi began to feel that something was strange when she saw the doll's nails and hair had grown long again, even though the doll had been stored in the warehouse for over 5 years. The next day, while tidying up the house, Yosi was suddenly puzzled when she saw Mai chatting with a doll she had named Aya-chan. Although it seemed odd, Yosi considered it just a part of a child's imagination. However, that night, Yosi was again confused when Mai suddenly came to her room. Her daughter then said that she couldn't sleep after being hurt by Aya-chan, who was jealous of her. Hearing those words, Yosi, who didn't believe her, thought it was just a child's fantasy. That is why she immediately told Mai to go back to her room and rest.
しないよ。はい。よいしょ。これで大丈夫。
The next day, when Mai had a school friend over, she said that her mother's doll could talk. Hearing this, Rina, who didn't believe it, became curious and wanted to see it for herself. However, they were shocked when they saw Rina with a rather clear bite mark on her. Strangely, Mai insisted that the doll was the one who did it. Of course, that statement sounded impossible to anyone who heard it. The next day, Yosi told her husband that the strange doll had moved on its own the night before. However, Hiko thought that the incident was just Mai's doing. She was just being mischievous and too lost in her imagination. When her daughter went to school, Yosi, who was baking a cake, suddenly felt annoyed when she saw the strange doll sitting again in the hallway of the house, even though she didn't remember ever moving it there. Because she was starting to feel disturbed, Yosi finally decided to throw away that cursed doll for good. A little while later, while hanging laundry, Yosi was suddenly surprised when she saw fire trucks and ambulances rushing by. Her curiosity made her want to find out what was happening. Not long after, she saw a sanitation worker who had died after his body was crushed by a garbage compactor. During the evacuation process, the atmosphere at the scene looked so horrifying that anyone who saw it would feel a chill. But in the midst of that situation, something far stranger happened. Out of nowhere, Mai suddenly appeared, bringing back home that cursed doll. That night, Hiko was puzzled when he saw his wife still awake. Yosi then showed him the CCTV footage while saying that she was watching Mai, who appeared to be chatting with the doll. Yosi felt that something was wrong because the strange doll seemed to have a life of its own. Even in her opinion, the doll looked like the Chucky doll that often appears in horror movies. However, Hiko, who thought all of this was just excessive fear, still didn't believe her. Feeling that his wife was too consumed by anxiety, Hiko asked Yosi to stop thinking about it and go back to sleep. The next day, Mai suddenly invited her mother to play hide and seek. Although she wasn't really interested, Yosi still tried to comply with her daughter's request. However, she repeatedly reminded Mai not to hide inside the washing machine because she didn't want the terrible tragedy that had happened in the past to repeat itself. After that, Yosi underwent an examination at Nakamura Hospital. Dr. Nori decided to conduct several psychological tests to ensure her mental condition. After Yosi left the examination room, a pediatrician named Nobita then showed something to Hiko. Hiko was immediately shocked when he saw a number of scratch marks on Mai's body. After hearing the explanation and advice from Dr. Nori, Hiko began to suspect that his wife's psychological condition might have affected the way she treated their daughter. Worried that the situation would worsen, Hiko planned to admit Yosi to an inpatient unit until her mental condition stabilized. Meanwhile, Mai would stay with her grandmother temporarily for her own safety. Amidst feelings of guilt and regret, Yosi finally accepted the decision. However, she made one condition. Hiko had to immediately destroy the cursed doll at the temple because Yosi was certain that all the strange events plaguing her family were connected to that doll. Feeling that it was indeed necessary, Hiko immediately contacted the temple to request the burning of the sacred object. But before the request could be approved, Hiko was asked to send a photo of the item first so that it could be reviewed by the temple authorities. While taking the photo, Hiko's attention was suddenly drawn to a name inscribed on the doll. The maker's name was written as Yasumoto Koki. While sending the photo, A curious Hiko immediately searched for information about the doll's maker. It turned out that Yasumoto Koki was known as a maker of living dolls who had existed during the Showa Empire era around 1926. In the middle of his research, the temple then gave a rather shocking response. They asked Hiko to immediately hand over the doll, so it could be destroyed as soon as possible because, according to them, the Ayachan doll was very dangerous and had to be dealt with immediately. Hearing this warning, Hiko immediately intended to go to his mother's house to retrieve the doll. But upon arriving there, he instead saw Mai, who appeared to want to be carried. SM, thinking her grandchild was being clingy, immediately carried her back to the room. However, a moment later SM realized that the figure she had just carried was not Mai, but the Ayachan doll. With a panicked face, SM immediately called her son. While checking the storage closet, she asked Hiko to come to the house as soon as possible. A little while later, when the atmosphere was still filled with anxiety, a commotion was heard coming from inside the warehouse. Hiko immediately panicked when he found out that the doll that had been locked up had suddenly disappeared without a trace. Worried that something had happened to her grandchild, SM quickly rushed to Mai's room to check on her. But how shocked SM was when she realized that her grandchild had also vanished without a trace. In the midst of escalating panic, they tried to search for Mai in various places. Not long after, Mai was finally found standing alone on a bridge. Seeing that, they immediately made sure that Mai was fine and had no injuries. Long story short, Hiko, who had just arrived at the location, immediately panicked when he saw the atmosphere of the house, which felt very quiet and eerie. He was then shocked when he saw Mai coming with her mouth covered in bloodstains. After being successfully found and secured, the police explained that Mai had previously been attacked by a mysterious figure while trying to save herself. Hearing this, they immediately asked Hiko to step outside because there was something they wanted to show him. According to the information obtained, SM had been attacked by a long-haired, disheveled figure whose appearance closely resembled the Ayachan doll. The next day, Hiko finally felt somewhat relieved after a monk successfully secured the cursed doll to be destroyed. After placing a protective seal on the doll, a monk named Shinchan then invited Hiko to go to the temple to witness the destruction process firsthand. But it turned out that the doll had been swapped and was actually going to be sold to get money. He then explained that the doll made by Yasumoto Koki had very high value among antique collectors. After various considerations, Shinchan felt that the destruction process was not very profitable for him. That is why he intended to meet another collector who might be willing to buy the doll at a higher price. But in the middle of the journey, something horrifying began to happen. Suddenly, Shinchan felt extremely nauseous, causing his body to weaken. It seemed that because of the greed that had taken hold of him, Shinchan began to receive a terrible curse originating from that cursed doll. Upon arriving at the hospital, Hiko was again shocked to see that the doll was still intact. With a heavy sense of guilt, The temple head named Hayato expressed his apologies for the careless actions of his subordinate, which had caused the problem to become even more complicated. Realizing that he was not capable of handling the doll, Hayato finally decided to hand it over to a spiritual doll expert who was considered more experienced in dealing with such objects. Long story short, a sacred doll expert named Kanda explained that based on historical records he had studied, the doll was most likely made using the body of a small child. To confirm the truth of this suspicion, Kanda requested that the doll be examined using a CT scan machine. They were all left horrified when the examination results showed the presence of a child's skeletal remains inside the doll. This finding instantly turned the atmosphere chilling. Some time later, Kanda, who had just arrived, was again shocked to learn that the Aya-chan doll had been taken by the police. The officer then explained that the police team had immediately moved after learning that there was a child's remains hidden inside the doll. Since he had no authority to obstruct the investigation, Kanda finally handed over the examination photo results he had just obtained. But before parting ways, he repeatedly warned them to be careful when carrying the doll, because something bad could happen at any time. During the journey, Yamamoto asked everyone to follow him immediately.
しかもそれを買った客がさ。それじゃあとり。
But in the middle of the trip, their vehicle seemed to hit something. When they checked, a mysterious crying sound was heard coming from near the car wheel. Seeing this strange occurrence, Kanda suspected that they were being influenced by supernatural forces. Therefore, he immediately made the decision to take them to meet a legendary doll maker who might know the origins of the cursed object. Long story short, Kanda showed the doll to an elderly doll maker named Takashi. It didn't take long for Takashi to immediately recognize that the doll was indeed Yasumoto's work. After that, Takashi invited them inside the house to explain the history behind the creation of the cursed doll. Inside the house, which was filled with various collections of ancient dolls, Takashi began to tell the story passed down through his family about the figure of Yasumoto. According to the story, at that time Yasumoto was known as a very famous maker of living dolls. He lived with his simple family and was quite happy. However, that happiness did not last long because his only daughter, named Aya, was born with a rare disease that was difficult to cure. As time went on, Aya's condition continued to deteriorate, until one day, her mother, named Kiko, began to lose hope. Unable to bear seeing her daughter suffer any longer, Kiko finally intended to end their suffering by ending the lives of her entire family. However, everything did not go according to plan. Kiko's attempt actually failed and resulted in Aya dying alone. At that very moment, a panicked Yasumoto tried to cover up his wife's actions by making a doll using Aya's body. After a few weeks passed, Kiko, whose condition was worsening, finally asked her husband to bury the Aya doll together with her. According to her request, Kiko, who was filled with regret, wanted to be buried in one grave with her daughter so that they would never be separated again. When Kiko finally passed away, Yasumoto fulfilled that request by burying them on a remote island called Kanajima. However, according to rumors that had circulated for years, the doll later disappeared after being stolen by treasure hunters. Even so, some people had a different belief. They believed that the Aya doll came out of the grave on its own and wandered around looking for new parents who could replace the family it had lost. After telling that horrifying story, a terrified Takashi asked Kanda to immediately take the doll away from his house. He did not want that cursed object to remain near him any longer. During the journey back, Yosi, who had an idea, immediately suggested it to the others. She suggested that the Aya doll be returned to her mother's grave on Kanajima Island. Hearing that, Kanda, who turned out to have the same thought, finally agreed to make the trip to that island. Long story short, upon arriving at an inn near Kanajima, Kanda, who saw an old map of the island, intended to borrow it to help locate the grave site. A moment later, they were puzzled when they saw Kanda suddenly wearing ritual clothing that resembled sumo wrestler attire. Not long after that, Kanda asked everyone to prepare because he was going to perform a ritual to find the location of Kiko's grave.
天正上地正上農上地を矢をよらずの神外は天の七を供養36人を清めこの吉六根性は地の神36人めせとも外は天の七を供養28
When the grave location was almost found, they suddenly panicked because a small earthquake suddenly shook the area. In the midst of the tense situation, their panic increased when they heard a sound coming from inside the storage chest. How shocked they were when they found out that the Aya doll had come out of the chest again. Fortunately, after trying hard, they finally managed to secure the doll before something worse happened. Nevertheless, as a result of the chaos that had just occurred, Kanda had to bear the consequences. He just realized that his foot had been pierced by a rusty nail quite deeply, causing him great pain. The next day, because they were worried about tetanus infection, Kanda was asked to go to the hospital to receive medical treatment. Meanwhile, Kiko and Yoshi would continue their plan to return the Aya doll to Kiko's grave. Before leaving, Kanda handed over a metal detector to help with the grave search process. According to him, people in ancient times often placed coins in graves as a form of respect for those who had passed away. After all preparations were complete and the instructions were clear enough, Kiko and Yoshi immediately set off for Kanajima Island. Upon arriving at the location, Kiko immediately searched for Kiko's grave using the metal detector given by Kanda. After searching for some time, they finally managed to find Kiko's grave. After the grave was found, they immediately offered prayers before returning the Aya doll to her mother's resting place. But as that process was taking place, something horrifying happened again. Suddenly, the doll's hair grew long and wrapped around their bodies. Kiko and Yoshi panicked as their bodies became entangled and difficult to move. Fortunately, with all the effort she could muster, Yoshi managed to free herself by cutting through the tangled hair using a piece of broken glass that was nearby. After successfully escaping that dangerous situation, they were finally able to complete the ritual and return the Aya doll to her mother's grave. Long story short, Yoshi and her family went back to living their lives as usual. They started their day with breakfast together while enjoying a much calmer atmosphere than before. Meanwhile, outside the house, Kanda intended to check on Hiko and Yoshi's condition because it had been over a week since they had been difficult to reach after returning from Kanajima Island. Feeling that something was wrong, he decided to come and see them directly. However, as he entered the apartment elevator, Kanda crossed paths with Hiko's family, who appeared to be heading out for a walk. Seeing that they looked fine, Kanda felt somewhat relieved. Not long after, Kanda showed a CCTV recording that he had previously kept. The recording showed my chatting with a doll while telling the story of Aya. In the recording, it was heard that Aya actually hated her mother very much because throughout her life, she had often received painful treatment. That story was believed to be the beginning of the birth of the grudge and terrible curse that had surrounded the doll all this time. And this is where the story of this Japanese horror film ends.